The nurse had just fastened a plastic hospital band around my wrist when I heard my son-in-law whisper, "Once she's admitted, the bank can't pretend she's still making independent decisions." My name is Nora Bennett. I was 67 years old when my daughter and her husband began manufacturing evidence that I could no longer be trusted with my own life. It did not begin with a lawyer at my door or a stack of papers on a dining table. It began with a storm, a twisted ankle, and an offer that sounded so reasonable, I was embarrassed to refuse it. I live outside Savannah, Georgia, where Frank and I spent 32 years building Bennett Marine and Storage on 14 acres beside an industrial inlet. We stored boats, repaired engines, rented warehouse bays, and leased 2 docks to charter captains. Frank handled the machines. I handled payroll, contracts, taxes, insurance, and every loan we ever signed. When he died 5 years earlier, everyone assumed I would sell. I kept running it instead. My only daughter, Rachel, was 41. Her husband, Victor Lang, owned a restaurant renovation company. They had been married 12 years, and their 19-year-old daughter, Lily, was away at college. We were not a broken family. We had Sunday lunches, Christmas at my house, and years of ordinary trust behind us. That is why I did not see danger when it first arrived, looking like help. In late August, a tropical storm knocked a tree across my garage and flooded the loading entrance at one warehouse. While checking a drain, I twisted my ankle badly enough to need crutches for a week. Rachel insisted I stay with them. 11 days, she said. Then you can go back to pretending you're indestructible. Victor brought soup, drove me to the yard, fixed a camera at my house, and offered to help with business email, while my office manager, Teresa, handled storm claims. I gave him the password to a secondary company inbox. It seemed harmless. By the second week, I was back home, walking, driving, and working. Rachel called every morning. Victor stopped by the yard twice. Nothing about their concern felt unusual enough to frighten me. Then small things began going wrong. Then I missed a meeting. My paper planner said the insurance broker was coming Thursday at 10:30. He arrived Wednesday and waited 40 minutes. My digital calendar showed Wednesday. 3 days later, a warehouse utility account produced a late notice for a bill I had never received. The following week, my dentist called to ask why I had missed a cleaning. The card on my refrigerator clearly showed the appointment for the next month. Rachel came over that afternoon with groceries. "Mom, this is the 3rd thing. I didn't forget a bill I never got." She put eggs in my refrigerator and answered with a slow, careful, "Okay." It was the tone that bothered me. Not angry, not worried, clinical. "Do not talk to me like I'm a patient. I'm not. You're collecting mistakes." Her face tightened, then smoothed. "I'm collecting groceries." She kissed me and left. The next morning, I opened my freezer and found my house keys beside a bag of peas. That frightened me. I remembered hanging them beside the pantry. I remembered Rachel returning briefly the previous evening because she had forgotten her scarf, but memory suddenly felt like evidence I could no longer trust. Without telling anyone, I saw my doctor. Blood work was normal. Blood pressure was normal. I passed a cognitive screen without difficulty. Dr. Shaw told me nothing she saw suggested impairment and scheduled a longer evaluation only because I asked for one. I drove home relieved, but the keys still bothered me. I began wondering whether I had become less reliable without noticing. 2 days later, Teresa walked into my office carrying printed emails. 2 days later, the strangest thing happened at the yard. Teresa placed 3 messages on my desk. One redirected fuel invoices. One changed the contact on our property insurance. A third told a dock tenant to coordinate renewals with Victor because I was reducing day-to-day responsibilities. I had written none of them. They had been sent from my main company account and then deleted. Our IT contractor found logins beginning during the week I stayed at Rachel's house. I drove to Victor's place while Rachel was at work and put the printouts in front of him. He barely reacted. "Oh, those. You wrote them? I cleaned up a few things while you were hurt. You had access to a different inbox. Your passwords were saved. The laptop probably opened it. Why tell people I was stepping back? Because for 11 days you were. And why delete the messages? I didn't. They disappeared. He gave me a tired look. Maybe you deleted them. That sentence changed the conversation. I stood and told him never to enter another account of mine. As I reached the door, he said, Rachel is already worried you're becoming suspicious. Suspicious of what? He smiled. Exactly. The next morning, I changed every password, called my bank, locked down the business accounts, and told Teresa no major instruction was valid unless she heard it from me directly. Then I opened a notebook and began writing dates, events, and exact phrases. I did not yet know whether someone was manipulating me. I only knew I needed a version of reality that could not be edited after the fact. The notebook filled faster than I expected. September 29th. Dock gate alarm switched off remotely. September 30th. Victor tells Rachel I left the south gate unsecured. Teresa confirms she locked it herself. October 1st. Fuel supplier asks whether new family management has approved our account. That last one nearly caused a real problem. A delivery truck arrived at 6 in the morning and refused to unload 8,000 gallons of marine fuel because someone had told the supplier our company was entering a management transition. I spent 2 hours on the phone proving I still controlled the account, while 3 charter captains waited at the pumps. At 9, Victor appeared as if summoned by the chaos. I heard there's a fuel issue. From whom? He hesitated. Rachel. Rachel does not work here. She worries. Then she has an impressive information network. He glanced toward Teresa's office. This is what I mean. You're making everything adversarial. No. Someone changed my supplier instructions. Maybe you did it while you were on pain medication. I had taken exactly 4 prescription pain tablets after my fall, all during the first 2 days. The fuel change had been made more than 2 weeks later. I told him that. Victor sighed and rubbed his face. Nora, I'm not trying to fight. But if every mistake becomes proof of a conspiracy, that is its own kind of warning sign. It was clever. Whatever happened, suspicion itself could be used against me. That afternoon, Teresa closed my office door. I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to get mad at me. That usually means I'm about to get mad. Victor asked me last week whether you had ever forgotten payroll. My stomach tightened. What did you say? That you've never missed it in the 14 years I've worked here. What else? He asked whether you repeat instructions, whether you get lost in the yard, whether customers have complained about confusion. And you didn't tell me? I thought he was worried because of your fall. Then the emails happened. I added her statement to the notebook. The next morning, a customer named Calvin Reed came into my office carrying a storage renewal. He had kept 2 boats with us for 9 years. Your son-in-law says you're retiring, he said. I'm not. He told me at the Marina Club that your daughter would probably be running things by winter. What exactly did he say? Calvin shrugged. That families have to step in before older parents make expensive mistakes. That sentence made the room tilt more than the keys had. Victor was not only changing accounts, he was seeding a story among people who could later be called witnesses. That evening I called Helen. He's interviewing my employees and customers about whether I'm confused. Good, she said. I almost shouted. How is that good? Because now he is leaving footprints. She told me to stop correcting the rumors one by one. Let people repeat what Victor had told them. Let them remember where the idea came from. The advice felt unnatural. I had spent my entire working life fixing errors as soon as I found them. Now I had to watch a lie spread far enough to reveal who planted it. 2 days later, Victor made another move. He called our security company and tried to add himself as an emergency contact for the boatyard. The representative refused because he was not an authorized officer. Victor told them I had verbally approved it. They called me to confirm. I said no. Within 20 minutes, Rachel phoned. Why are you shutting Victor out when he's trying to help? Why is he trying to become an emergency contact at my business, in case something happens? To whom? To you. And what has happened to me? She went silent. I waited. Finally, she said, You always need a courtroom answer. No, I need one honest sentence. She hung up. That night, someone tried to reset the password on my personal email. The security alert showed the request had come from a device previously recognized by my account, a device I had used at Rachel's house while my ankle was injured. I changed the recovery settings and added the alert to Helen's file. For the first time, fear turned into anger. I was no longer wondering whether I had become forgetful. I was wondering how long they had been waiting for me to become vulnerable enough to make the story believable. Then a man named Douglas Crane arrived at the boatyard asking for me. He worked for Harborline Development and assumed Victor had told me about their conversations. What conversations? I asked. Douglas went pale. Harborline was watching waterfront parcels because the county was considering a rezoning change. If it passed, my 14 acres could become far more valuable for mixed-use development. Victor had contacted them about a possible sale and said the family was preparing for a transition because of my health concerns. When did he first contact you? Douglas checked his tablet. August 9th. 18 days before I fell. I felt the entire story shift under my feet. Victor had not reacted to my injury. He had already been looking at my land. By 4 that afternoon, I was in the office of Helen Park, an attorney Frank and I had used years earlier. I showed her the emails, my notebook, and the Harborline contact. Her first question was simple. Who benefits if you look incapable? Within days, her forensic accountant found the answer. Victor's renovation company was collapsing under lawsuits, unpaid subcontractors, and a banknote of more than $700,000 due before Thanksgiving. Harborline had also drafted a consulting agreement that would pay Victor $240,000 if a sale of my property closed. I wanted to believe Rachel knew nothing. Then I checked my doorbell camera from the night my keys appeared in the freezer. Rachel had come over with groceries. She left at 7:31, returned with her old key less than a minute later, stayed inside 58 seconds while I was upstairs, and walked out carrying the scarf she had supposedly come to retrieve earlier. Helen would not let me accuse her yet. Document first, she said. Confront later. That same week, Lily called from college. Grandma, are you selling the yard? No. Dad said the rezoning vote got moved up. Mom said you still hadn't agreed to the evaluation. Dad said if they couldn't get authority before the bank deadline, the whole thing was useless. I sat very still. What evaluation? She didn't say. Grandma, are you sick? No. The next morning, Helen sent me for a full independent neuropsychological assessment. 4 hours later, the specialist documented that my memory, reasoning, executive function, and financial judgment were intact. Helen read the report and said, "Now we know what is true. Next, we find out what they are trying to make look true." I did not have to wait long. Before the consultant appeared, Rachel tried once more to make the plan look ordinary. She invited me to dinner at her house on a Tuesday. Victor was supposedly working late. Lily was still at college. For the first 20 minutes, Rachel talked about recipes, a coworker's divorce, and a neighbor who had installed an ugly fence. It felt so normal that I almost relaxed. Then she placed a tablet beside my plate. "I need you to approve one thing." On the screen was a medical portal form naming Rachel as a person authorized to discuss appointments, diagnoses, treatment plans, and discharge instructions with my providers. I already have an emergency contact. Me. Emergency contact is not the same as access to my records. It would make things easier. For whom? Her mouth tightened. Why does everything have to become a negotiation? Because you keep bringing me documents I didn't ask for. It's a standard authorization. Then it can wait. She took the tablet back too quickly. As she did, another screen flashed underneath the form. I saw only a title before she closed it. Care. Transition. Checklist. N. Bennett. I looked at her. What was that? What? The other document. Work. With my name on it? She stared at me for half a second, then laughed. You saw Bennett and assumed it was you. I have an employee named Bennett. It was a terrible lie because Rachel had never been good at lying quickly. As a child, she smiled when she was frightened. She was smiling now. I did not challenge her. Instead, I asked for coffee. While she was in the kitchen, I looked toward the mudroom. Victor's briefcase was on the bench. He was supposedly working late, but his car was in the garage. A minute later, I heard a floorboard upstairs. Rachel returned with 2 cups. "Is Victor home?" I asked. "No." Another soft step sounded above us. She heard it too. Her fingers tightened around the mug. Then Victor came down the stairs, pretending surprise. "Nora, I thought you'd be gone by now." I looked at Rachel. "You said he was working. He came home early." Victor glanced at the tablet, then at her. It was one of those quick married couple looks that contains an entire conversation. I stood. "You don't have to leave," Rachel said. "I do." At the front door, Victor asked whether I had thought any more about simplifying operations at the boatyard. I said, "Not once." He smiled. "You should." The next morning, Helen asked me to describe the tablet screen exactly. "Care transition checklist," she repeated. That language matters. Maybe it really was her work. Maybe. But families planning ordinary help do not usually hide the helper upstairs. Omar later discovered Sandra Pike's consulting company had been paid $1,800 from Rachel and Victor's joint account 2 weeks before that dinner. Whatever the checklist was, they had already hired someone to help build it. It arrived that weekend. Rachel invited me to brunch at a hotel overlooking the river. Victor was there with a woman named Sandra Pike, who introduced herself as a family aging consultant. She already had a file. Inside were the missed insurance meeting, the utility bill, the dentist appointment, my fall, my increased suspicion, and my resistance to assistance. Sandra suggested a 3-day executive wellness assessment at a private clinic outside Charleston. "I already had an evaluation," I said before I could stop myself. Rachel stared at me. "You did what?" "My medical care is private." Victor leaned back. "That secrecy is part of the problem." I stood to leave. In the lobby, Rachel followed me. "We're scared, Mom." "Of what?" "I have never gotten lost driving. I have never left a stove on. I have never forgotten your name." "What exactly are you scared of?" Her eyes filled. "For once, why can't you let someone take care of you?" I looked at her and asked, "What does my care have to do with the rezoning vote?" Her face emptied. "What are you talking about?" That 1 second told me she knew. Helen was furious that I had tipped them off, so we changed strategy. I stopped resisting. When Rachel called, I sounded tired. When she suggested a break from the yard, I said maybe. When she asked whether I would reconsider the clinic, I said I was exhausted enough to try anything. Warmth returned to her voice immediately. "That's all we wanted, Mom." While they relaxed, Helen's investigator reconstructed the mistakes. The dentist appointment had been changed online from a device used, while I stayed at Rachel's house. The insurance calendar entry had been edited from the same device, a utility forwarding request traced back to Victor's office. Then Teresa discovered a draft corporate resolution stating that, because of temporary health limitations, I was delegating control of Bennett Marine to Rachel for 90 days. My signature was already on it. It was a forgery. The upload traced to a document service account paid with Victor's company card. That night, Lily called again. She had been printing a flight confirmation from her father's tablet when a message appeared on screen. She took a photo before it disappeared. Rachel had written, "If she checks in Friday, Sandra says the doctor can document escalating safety concerns. Bank wants third-party support before it will discuss emergency signatory access." Victor had replied, "Harborline needs a clean authority path before Monday. If she refuses papers, we pivot to temporary incapacity and use the management resolution." I read the messages twice. The clinic was no longer about health. It was supposed to create a setting where my family could say I had been admitted because I was unsafe, then use that story to push the bank and the business at the same time. Helen contacted the clinic's legal department, the bank's fraud unit, and a county financial crimes investigator named Caleb Morris. Then I told Rachel I would go on Friday. Lily came home the next evening despite my telling her not to. She arrived with a backpack, 2 chargers, and the furious energy of someone who had spent the entire drive rehearsing arguments. "I'm not confronting them," she said before I could speak. "Helen already threatened me with legal vocabulary. She gave you good advice." "I know. I hate it." She sat at my kitchen table and showed me the 2 screenshots again. The messages were short, but several details bothered Helen. Sandra had apparently promised that an attending physician could document escalating safety concerns before anyone at the clinic had evaluated me. Victor believed the bank could be moved by the fact of admission itself. Rachel's wording suggested they had discussed this more than once. "Do you think Mom knows about the fake signature?" Lily asked. "I don't know. Do you think Dad is using her?" "I think adults can be used and still make choices." She looked down. "That sounds like a yes." "It sounds like I'm not giving anyone an excuse before I have facts." Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Rachel. Her voice was soft. "I heard Lily drove home. She's here. She should be studying. She is 19. She's upset because you're involving her in adult issues." I nearly laughed. "She saw your messages on Victor's tablet." Silence. A long one. Then Rachel said she had no right to read private conversations. She saw a message while printing something he asked her to print. "She sent it to you?" "Yes." Rachel exhaled slowly. "Mom, those messages look worse without context. Give me the context." "We were trying to make sure the clinic understood this wasn't just a spa weekend." "And what does Harborline need before Monday?" Another silence. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone. "Victor has been discussing contingency plans because you refuse to discuss any future at all." "That is not an answer. You already decided what you think." "No, I am asking what you did." She hung up. Lily had been standing in the hallway. "That was Mom?" "Yes." "Did she deny it?" "No." The next morning, Helen met with the clinic's general counsel. What she learned made the plan even stranger. Sandra had contacted the clinic as an outside family coordinator and described me as a reluctant patient whose daughter was concerned about possible early cognitive decline. She had asked whether family members could provide collateral information privately. The clinic had said yes, as families often do, but nobody at the clinic had promised a diagnosis, an incapacity finding, or a recommendation that Rachel control my money. Sandra had taken ordinary clinical procedures and sold them to my family as a path to authority, or Victor had heard what he wanted to hear. Either way, Friday was designed to create a scene. I would arrive under family supervision, be formally admitted, and while I was inside, documents would begin moving elsewhere. The bank's fraud investigator confirmed something else. 2 days earlier, someone had called asking what documentation would be needed if an elderly business owner became suddenly unable to manage accounts. The caller did not identify himself as Victor, but he gave enough details about Bennett Marine to make the bank suspicious. Helen asked whether I wanted to cancel. For several seconds, I did. Then I pictured the keys in the freezer. If I canceled, they would say fear had made me irrational. If I went and they behaved exactly as Helen suspected, the story would finally belong to evidence instead of family opinion. "I'm going," I said. Lily objected immediately. "What if they try to keep you there? The clinic already knows. What if Dad gets angry? Caleb will be nearby. What if Mom cries?" That one stopped me. "She probably will. And what are you going to do?" I looked at my granddaughter. "Listen to what she says, not how sad it makes me feel." By Friday morning, the plan was in place. Helen had confirmed the clinic knew nothing about any plan to declare me incapacitated. I would attend voluntarily, sign only normal medical intake forms, and let Rachel, Victor, and Sandra reveal whatever they had brought. Caleb would be nearby. Helen would be inside the building. Rachel picked me up at 8:15. Victor sat in front. They had packed an extra overnight bag for me, as if I were a child who might forget socks. Halfway there, Victor asked, "Did you bring the business checkbook?" I looked at him. Why would I bring that to a medical clinic? He stared through the windshield. Just asking. The clinic looked more like a private hotel than a hospital. At intake, a nurse named Denise asked whether I was there voluntarily. Yes. I said. Rachel answered over me. She's been having some trouble understanding how serious things have become. Denise looked directly at her. I asked Ms. Bennett. That tiny moment steadied me. Denise took my blood pressure and gave me standard consent forms. I read every page. No financial authority, no incapacity language, no power of attorney. Then Sandra appeared carrying a leather portfolio. She was not employed by the clinic. Denise fastened a plastic identification band around my wrist and stepped away to copy my insurance card. I was standing beside the counter, purse on my shoulder, car keys in my hand, when Victor leaned toward Rachel. Once she's admitted, the bank can't pretend she's still making independent decisions. Rachel hissed. Keep your voice down. I turned. What did you just say? Victor froze. Nothing. I heard you. Nora, don't spiral now. Sandra immediately used the same soft tone Rachel had been using for weeks. This is why a short observation period will be helpful. Then she opened her portfolio. Inside were documents Denise had never shown me. A request asking my bank to recognize Rachel as an emergency financial contact, a temporary business continuity agreement, and a shareholder consent giving Rachel authority over time-sensitive property negotiations. I asked who prepared them. Victor said, they're just backups. For what? If you're unavailable. For 3 days? We don't know, it will only be 3. Rachel took my arm. Mom, please stop picking apart every sentence. I looked at her. Why? Because every conversation becomes a trap with you now. I asked, who told Harborline I was incapable? Her eyes jumped to Victor. He said, this isn't about Harborline. So there is a Harborline. Rachel snapped toward him. You said she didn't know. Silence. Victor's patience broke. Fine. She knows. Great. Maybe we can stop pretending that yard is sacred. Do you know what 14 waterfront acres are worth if the rezoning passes? Yes, I said. I had it appraised last year. Rachel stared at me. You never told us. Why would I? Because I'm your daughter. That is not a title to my balance sheet. She stood, suddenly furious. The sale could solve everything. Everything what? Victor said her name quietly. She kept going. Our mortgage, his company, the loans, Lily's tuition, all of it. So this is about your debt. It's about family. No, it is about money you need and property I own. Rachel started crying. She said Frank had spent his life at the yard, and I had turned keeping it into a monument to grief. I let her finish. Then I asked the question that had been waiting in me for weeks. Did you put my keys in the freezer? Her crying stopped. Victor looked away. Sandra frowned. Rachel whispered, you were forgetting things already. The room went silent. She had not denied it. What else? I asked. Mom, what else did you change? Victor pushed back his chair. This is going nowhere. I turned to him. The dentist appointment? Nothing. The insurance meeting? Nothing. The utility bill? He finally snapped. It was controlled. Nothing important was going to happen. I stared at him. You manufactured mistakes. We created examples. Even Rachel looked at him. Examples? Victor threw up his hands. Don't act shocked. You moved the keys. Rachel's face twisted. You said that would make her accept help. You never told me you were changing her medical appointments. You gave me her tablet. Sandra closed her portfolio. I was not told incidents were being created. Victor turned on her. You knew we needed documentation. Documentation of real concerns. Victor laughed bitterly. Real concerns. My banknote is due in weeks. Her land solves it. She refuses even to discuss it. And everyone acts like that refusal is holy because she's old. I stood. He pushed the shareholder consent toward me. Sign temporary authority. Nobody has to sell today. It gives us time. No, your daughter is about to lose her house. Then she should have told me. She was ashamed. So you forged my signature instead. Rachel went still. What? I removed a copy of the forged management resolution from my purse and laid it on the table. Rachel picked it up. Victor, you told me the filing service created a blank draft. It is a draft. With Mom's signature? They needed a placeholder. Before Helen entered the consultation room, the pressure went even further. Victor reached into Sandra's portfolio and pulled out another page I had not seen. It was not a medical document at all. It was a letter to Harborline stating that Bennett Marine was entering an interim family management period and inviting the company to continue negotiations with Rachel as authorized representative. Who wrote this? I asked. It's a draft, Victor said. Everything is a draft until you need it to become real. Rachel rubbed her temples. Can we please stop doing this word by word? No, that is exactly how documents work. Victor shoved a pen across the table. Then read it. Cross out what you don't like, but sign something today. I am not signing a property letter during medical intake. You are impossible, Sandra said. Victor, lower your voice. He ignored her. Do you know what I have spent the last 3 months doing? Holding lenders off, calling contractors, trying to keep Rachel from having panic attacks, and you sit in that yard acting like none of it concerns you. It did not concern me because nobody told me. We knew what you'd say. You mean no. Yes. The word exploded out of him. For a second, even he looked startled by it. Then he pointed at the documents. Yes, we knew you'd say no, and your no would destroy us. I looked at Rachel. Was that the problem? Not that I couldn't decide, that I had decided. She could not look at me. Victor answered for her. You don't get to hoard millions while your daughter loses everything. Hoard? The land was Frank's too. And now? He said nothing. Now it is legally mine. You always hide behind legal words. No, today I'm hiding behind a very simple one. Mine. That was when Rachel finally turned on him. You said Mom would still own everything until a sale. She would. You said the authority only let us negotiate. It does. I tapped the shareholder consent. This authorizes disposition of real property. Rachel read the clause. Her expression changed. Victor. He leaned over her shoulder. It's standard language. You told me it couldn't transfer anything. Not without other steps. What steps? He lost patience. Why does it matter? We need leverage now. Rachel pushed the paper away. Sandra quietly moved her chair closer to the door. I asked, Rachel, when you moved my keys, what did he tell you would happen next? She stared at the table. He said you would call me scared. Then I was supposed to suggest a doctor. Did I call? No. What happened? You called your doctor yourself. Victor laughed bitterly, which ruined the timing. Sandra looked at him. What timing? He realized what he had said. I did too. What was supposed to happen after I called Rachel? I asked. No one answered. I asked again. Rachel whispered. Sandra was supposed to recommend the clinic sooner. Sandra's face went white. That is not what I agreed to. Victor slammed his palm on the table. Can everyone stop pretending they weren't part of this? The knock came seconds later. Someone knocked once. The door opened. Denise entered first. Behind her came Helen and Caleb Morris. Victor's face lost all color. Helen looked at me. Nora, are you all right? Yes. Caleb looked at the papers on the table. Mr. Lang, leave those where they are. Victor laughed. This is insane. Helen answered, then explaining the forged resolution, unauthorized account changes, and negotiations to sell property you do not own should be easy. Rachel turned toward me. You set us up. No, I let you finish. Before anyone could say more, another man appeared behind Helen, Douglas Crane from Harborline. Victor stared at him. What is he doing here? Douglas said Harborline's legal department had provided its communications after learning I had never authorized Victor to negotiate. Then he gave the date of Victor's first contact. August 9th. Rachel sat down hard. That was before Mom fell. Victor said nothing. You told me you called them because her fall scared you. He rubbed his forehead. I knew the rezoning rumor. I was exploring options. Rachel looked sick. The timeline had trapped him more cleanly than anything I could have said. The plan existed before the supposed evidence of my decline. Douglas had one more surprise. Victor had also contacted Tide Point Capital about carving off the North Warehouse tract. He had signed a non-binding term sheet in the name of an entity called Bennett Family Holdings. There is no Bennett Family Holdings, I said. Helen was already calling her investigator. 20 seconds later, he found it. The company had been registered 6 weeks earlier. Organizer, Victor Lang. Registered agent, Rachel Lang. Every eye turned to my daughter. Rachel shook her head. No, I signed something Victor said was a lender disclosure. For the first time that day, she looked frightened of him instead of me. Victor snapped, "Now you're innocent?" Rachel stood. I moved the keys. I helped make the list. I knew about Harborline later. I did not know you started before the fall, and I did not know about this company. You wanted the money too, she slapped him. Caleb stepped between them. Victor glared at me. You could have fixed all of this with one check. I looked at him. I might have helped if you had asked. That silenced him. Caleb led Victor into the hall while Helen collected the papers. Rachel stayed in the chair, crying without speaking. At 2:40 that afternoon, Victor was arrested after investigators confirmed the forged resolution had been submitted to a financial institution as genuine. Rachel left with her own attorney. I drove myself home. The first thing I did was remove Rachel's alarm code and key access. The second was open the freezer and sit on the kitchen floor staring at the shelf where my keys had been. For weeks I had wondered whether my own mind had betrayed me. Now I knew my daughter had placed those keys there and then watched me become afraid. That was the moment I finally cried. Lily found me on the floor 40 minutes later. She sat beside me and leaned her head against my shoulder. Neither of us tried to make the day sound better than it was. The investigation moved quickly after that. Victor's records showed he had promised lenders repayment from a pending family asset transaction. Rachel admitted moving the keys, giving him access to my tablet, and helping build a written list of incidents so the clinic would take their concerns seriously. She insisted she had not known about the forged signature, the fake family company, or Victor's early contact with Harborline. Then Helen found one final irony in Frank's old estate files. The boatyard operations were mine to control, but the land itself had been placed years earlier into a family land trust. I was the lifetime controlling beneficiary, yet any sale required a second independent trustee appointed by the bank. Even if Victor had succeeded in making me look incapable, Rachel could not have sold the land alone. His entire scheme had been built around an asset structure he had never bothered to understand. The rezoning passed in October. I did not sell. I hired Teresa as general manager, reduced my own week to 4 days, and modernized part of the yard because I wanted to, not because anyone had frightened me into it. Victor's business collapsed. He later entered a plea agreement tied to the forged filing, unauthorized account access, and false business documents. For 2 months, I spoke to Rachel only when attorneys required it. Then she sent me a letter. The first page was full of fear, debt, Victor, pressure, and explanations. I almost stopped reading. On the second page, she finally wrote something useful. I knew you were competent enough to say no. That is why we had to make your no look unreliable. Near the end, she wrote, I put your keys in the freezer, and then I watched you doubt yourself. I do not know how to ask forgiveness for that. I kept the letter but did not answer it. In January, Rachel came to the boatyard gate without calling. I refused to let her in. She left a small envelope with Teresa. Inside was the old brass house key I had given her when Lily was born. No note. 3 weeks later, I agreed to meet her in a public park. Did you think I was incompetent? I asked. No. Then why the clinic? She looked at the river. Because we needed something stronger than your permission. It hurt, but at least it was true. I gave her rules. No uninvited visits. No keys. No questions about money or inheritance. No doctors, no business access, and no turning my refusal into evidence against me. We would meet once a month in public. I am not offering trust, I said. I am offering 1 hour next month. She nodded. By summer, Lily was home from college and working 3 days a week at the boatyard under Teresa. One morning, Almost a year after the storm, I arrived before sunrise and found Rachel waiting outside the locked gate with a cardboard box. "I know I wasn't invited," she said. "I'm not asking to come in. These were Dad's. Victor had them in storage." She set the box down and stepped back. On top was Frank's dented red thermos. Beneath it lay old gauges, a coil of dock rope, and the brass compass I thought had been lost years ago. I unlocked the pedestrian gate. "Bring the box to the office." Rachel carried it in, set it on my desk, and did not look at the books or ask about the new storage racks. She turned to leave. "Rachel," she stopped. I picked up Frank's compass. The needle trembled and settled north. "Coffee next Thursday, 10 o'clock. The place by the river." Her eyes filled, but she stayed where she was. "Okay." Normal voice. She walked out. A forklift beeped in the service yard. Teresa called that the fuel delivery was early. Lily lifted the box of old tools. I slipped the compass into my pocket, unlocked the office, and went to work.